A record number of bills filed, setting the stage for the session. But a big question remains: who will lead the Texas House?
We need to come together and frankly, quit all of this internecine fighting that's going on.
Why a former governor is weighing in and making the case for a bipartisan approach. Lawmakers pushed to block a death row inmate's execution. Now the Texas Supreme Court says they went too far. Why they could still get what they want. As Texas grows, counties are looking to acquire land to keep up with traffic and more. So what do you do if they come for your property? And how soon should you start to fight back against eminent domain?
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Tuesday was the first day to file legislation for the upcoming session, and Texas lawmakers filed a record number of bills. Ryan Chandler looks into why this could be a sign of things to come when lawmakers get back to work in January.
Well, it's a big day after a long night here at the Texas Capitol. Some staffers camping out behind the Senate chamber all night to secure a spot in line. The pre-session sleepover, more symbolic than strategic. The legislature gives no favor for being first. But lawmakers are eager to get back to work, setting a record on Tuesday, submitting more than 1,500 bills, the most ever filed on the first day.
A lot of pent-up demand for legislation. Certainly Republicans have been emboldened by the election results here in Texas.
Some of the first filed on border security, aimed at restricting undocumented students from getting in-state tuition, requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote, and allowing Texas to negotiate border security with Mexico. Democrats ambitious on abortion and voting access, filing bills to create an exception for rape in the abortion ban and to allow electronic and same-day voter registration.
Typically what happens is you've got a handful of members who want to claim ownership on a particular subject matter, and so they will rush in order to get a low bill number.
But the legislative session is designed to kill bills, not pass them. Last year, lawmakers filed more than 8,000 bills. Only 1,169 became law, a success rate of less than 15%. Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
One big factor in how the next legislature progresses has yet to be determined. House members will soon vote to choose the next House Speaker. Current Speaker Dade Phelan faces a challenge from Mansfield Republican David Cook. Democrats Ana Maria Ramos and John Bryant are also in the race. But with the GOP holding a 26-seat majority in the chamber, the Speaker's race is realistically between Cook and Phelan. Former Governor Rick Perry is working behind the scenes to help Phelan keep the Speaker's gavel. Ryan Chandler spoke with Perry about how he sees the race and what's at stake for the state.
Well, Governor Perry, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you.
You've joined Speaker Phelan's team, making sure that he wants to retain the Speaker's gavel. I want you, Governor, to take us behind the scenes in Speaker Phelan's office. That seems to be where all of the action is happening nowadays. How confident are you that Speaker Phelan will remain Speaker Phelan?
Oh, he's got the votes to be elected Speaker. I'm not concerned about that. What I'm trying to help these members focus on is, how do we move forward in the state? They had a great session last session. Obviously, one of the issues that's out in front of us is that of our public schools and school choice. I'm a big proponent of school choice, have been for 20 plus years. And I will suggest to you that these education savings accounts, that's going to go forward, that's going to pass this session of the legislature. And, just helping the members understand, here's the focus we need to have.
You say Speaker Phelan has the votes. A lot of people are asking where and who are those votes? We know, of course, Representative Cook has put out a list of 48 Republicans who've pledged their support to him. How does that stack up with your internal math? Will you be publishing a list of support soon?
I will suggest we'll just wait until the votes happen and see who was right. I'm not sure I could pick Representative Cook out of a lineup, but I'm sure he's a fine young man and wish him well. But he's not going to be the Speaker when the gavel comes down.
Does the pathway to Speaker Phelan, I would assume it would run through keeping Democratic support and then supplementing with Republicans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I've been dealing with the legislative process for 40 years now. I came in January of 1985, and there have always been Democrats as chairs. When we had Republican speakers, I suggest that will continue to. We are a diverse state, and I think you sit down and you work with Democrats. I'm not going to change my philosophy. I'm going to keep my philosophy and my beliefs, but I'm going to work with you. I'll give you a great example. Representative Sinfronia Thompson. She's a female African-American, left-leaning trial lawyer from Houston, Texas. I'm a country boy, Anglo, male, and Republican. So,
right.
But we found things that we could work on together. And Representative Thompson, who she and I don't agree on a lot of philosophical things in the grand scheme of things, but we found places we could work together. And this was on child sexual trafficking when I was last session that I was governor in 2013. And my point is this: saying to the Democrats, we don't like you and you're banned to the hinterland, is bad public policy. And quite frankly, it's just a bad look. We're the Republican Party, we're the majority party, but we need to be open to other people's ideas. Talk to us. You're not going to run the show. You are not going to come and browbeat us into doing things we don't want to do. You know, Speaker Phelan has basically said, look, we're going to work with you. You're part of this. We're going to need your votes for constitutional amendments that require 100 votes, and there's not 100 Republicans. So you're going to have to work with the Democrats, find out ways to do it in a thoughtful way. This idea of Texas turning into Washington, D.C., and you know, we won't even talk to each other because you have the wrong initial behind your name. I think that's really bad long-term policy, and I know it's bad short-term policy. So I think Speaker Phelan properly has the right outlook. He's going to be the speaker, and we need to come together and, you know, and frankly, quit all of this internecine fighting that's going on. And what's best for Texas? That ought to be the question to everything that's out there.
Supporters of Cook are skeptical of Perry's claim that Phelan has the votes to be speaker. Newly elected Representative Mitch Little reacted on social media, simply saying, "Post the names." Ryan spoke at length with former Governor Perry, also getting his perspective on serving in the Trump administration and his thoughts on Texans who could join the cabinet. You can see the full interview now on our website. Just look for the link in this week's State of Texas story. A new twist in the legal battle to take a man off death row. Why the Texas Supreme Court is stepping in again, this time to let the execution continue. As Texas grows, counties are taking land for things like new roads and doing it more often. What you need to know if they come for your property, and how state legislators are taking a closer look at the law after our investigation. A daughter heads to Washington to continue her mother's work. How Texas's newest representative is honoring a decades-long legacy. Last month, the Texas Supreme Court temporarily blocked the execution of Robert Roberson, but now the justices say state lawmakers exceeded their authority with their legal moves that led to the delay. He is on death row for the murder of his 2-year-old daughter. His attorneys say his conviction was based on discredited science and he deserves a new trial. One day before his scheduled execution, the Texas House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence issued a subpoena for him to testify at the Capitol. That legal maneuver eventually blocked the execution. Ryan Chandler has been following this story. What does this mean for him, and is his execution actually going to go forward?
Well, it very well could. The person who will ultimately decide whether they will try to execute Roberson again is the Anderson County District Attorney, which is where his conviction was originally won. But it's much more complicated than that. What the Supreme Court said had nothing to do with the fundamental questions of guilt or innocence or whether Roberson should be executed or not. They were tasked with deciding whether the legislature's subpoena to have him testify was valid because that really sparked almost a constitutional crisis in Texas with the executive and the legislature competing over the separation of powers. The Supreme Court ultimately said no. The legislature stepped out of line when they called him to testify just because it was so close to his execution date. That move ultimately delayed his execution. But they also said if they want to compel him to testify in the future, they still can and they still intend to.
Well, lawmakers on the committee do believe that he deserves a new trial. Does the court's opinion end that effort?
No, it does not. The court that will ultimately decide whether Roberson gets another day in court is the other high court, the Court of Criminal Appeals. I just talked to Roberson's attorney, and she has been trying to get the court to accept that there is new evidence that deserves a new hearing. So far, the court has declined to do that. But in January, the composition of the CCA is going to look a lot different. There's 3 new judges coming in. So they hold out hope that perhaps there could be a new trial. But there's no indication that that's going to happen yet.
And just to understand this a little bit better, the Court of Criminal Appeals handles death penalty appeals. Right. So how did this case actually end up before the Texas Supreme Court?
Yeah, it's a really good question because at the heart of this issue is a criminal case and an execution. Typically, those matters would not be decided by the highest civil court, but the Court of Criminal Appeals. However, the question in front of the Supreme Court this week had nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It was simply about whether the legislature acted appropriately. This was a sheer civil question.
All right, we'll be following it closely. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
I just said no way. It's not going to happen. I'm going to do what I can to try and learn all I can, what rights we have.
As the population in Texas booms, public entities are turning to private land to keep up with growth. What you need to know if they come for your home using eminent domain, and why state lawmakers are taking a closer look at the law after our investigation, coming up. "14 days, that's how long landowners have to figure out what to do when the 10th fastest growing county in the nation comes for their property using eminent domain. Williamson County says it's trying to keep up with the influx of people moving in, sometimes using its power to take private land to do that. But as our Mercedez Hernandez learned, longtime locals are now sounding the alarm, especially for lawmakers in charge of regulating this complicated process.
Just 40 minutes outside Austin, row after row of hay bales, rolling hills of waving grass, and every few miles, a farmhouse.
This house, it's better for them because they're behind.
Angela Watuski's parents moved to East Williamson County more than 30 years ago.
Lived in a little small, tiny cabin first until we built this. All right.
Now she lives here with her own kids, taking walks to visit their sheep and feed the catfish. But a letter earlier this year interrupted their quiet lives in the country,
saying that we are holding meetings to talk about roads that will be coming through, it will be touching your property.
Her parents still own the land, so they went to a meeting set up by a contractor for the county this past spring.
My parents went in just thinking, oh, we'll check it out. And then Mom looked at the map and said, that's our barn where you want to put the road.
The road was Corridor K, now called Arterial K. The county says it would connect I-35 to a future segment of the East Wilco Highway, cutting through several plots of land, 3.5 acres of it, on the Watuski's property.
I just said no way. It's not going to happen. I'm going to do what I can to try and learn all I can, what rights we have.
It can be a very long process to plan for roads.
Connie Odom is the director of communications for the county. She says right now, the project is in a phase called a right-of-way preservation study. That's when planners refine the proposal, talk to landowners, and move plans around. She says it could be years before the project is officially greenlit.
Generally, we are not building a roadway until growth in that area dictates that the road needs to be built.
In 2010, the county's population was about 420,000 people. Now, it's nearly 700,000, projected to hit $1.3 million in the next 20 years. If the project does move forward, Wachowski says she's worried about going up against the county to keep her property.
At some point, eminent domain comes into play. You either have to sell or you get pushed out.
The chair calls House Bill 2730 by Desautels.
House Bill 2730 went into effect in 2022 and laid out some new protections for landowners when it comes to eminent domain. Entities that seek private land for public use must now provide owners with things like the Texas Landowners Bill of Rights and a written appraisal of their land. 30 days later, they'll send their final offer.
Once that final offer is made, property owners have just 14 days to respond.
That's what we arrived at the time.
We traveled hours away to Cleburne, State Representative Dwayne Burns' district. He co-authored the bill and now chairs the House Land and Resource Committee. He says there have been similar reforms proposed over the years, but HB 2730 is one of the latest to become law. He says it took 3 legislative sessions to come out with terms that appeased oil and gas companies, local governments, and landowner groups, including that 14-day time frame.
Is 14 days enough time to respond to something like that?
I would love to see more time, frankly. But given the whole parameter of everything, once they've been initially contacted, they've received the Landowner's Bill of Rights, they know about the project, they know what's coming, they've had time to prepare for that. If there are folks that have legitimate concerns with parts of that bill and not working for them, then they need to let us know.
Eminent domain attorney Dan Gaddis practices in Williamson County and served in the Texas legislature for 8 years. He says laws could do more to protect landowners, and public entities should be more open about their plans.
When you're talking about roadways and those types of things, and even in pipelines and power lines, we could be more transparent about that process. Transparency in the design process and where these routes are going to go.
Gaddis and Williamson County say it's rare that an eminent domain case reaches a courtroom, but that number is growing. There were 2,600 eminent domain cases on the county's docket in 2023. That's now almost 2,900 in 2024. He says it's the dollar amount an entity offers an owner that most often brings these cases to court.
Prices are not what they were 50 years ago. They're not what they were 6 months ago. We need to be allowed to put in more evidence of what real values are.
In 2019, the Wachowskis' land was worth $1.6 million. Today, it's closer to $3.2 million. Wachowski says if she does eventually decide to sell, her options are limited because her land is marked by Arterial K.
I don't see any way that you could sell without, you have to disclose it, and then that changes your buyer completely.
Take out informed and put told.
Yes.
In the months since first hearing about Arterial K, Wachowski and several others formed the group Preserve Wilco Now.
We held a town hall meeting in April and had over 150, almost 170 probably, people show up.
Sending their own letters out about the project, encouraging people to speak out against it and keep a close eye on their property values.
I had and have dreams for this place.
Because plans for Arterial K aren't final, Wachowski says she's still weighing her options. But it's not knowing when the project would happen that's weighing heaviest.
If it's 10 or 15 years away and we could still do something with that, I would make an effort to just pretend like it's not coming.
Something laid out in HB 2730 is that property owners can file a complaint with the Texas Real Estate Commission if they feel they're being treated unfairly in an eminent domain case. I reached out to that group and it says it doesn't have record of or track complaints made specifically about eminent domain. Like Representative Burns said, if there are issues or updates needed to the law, his office and committee need to hear about it. We've listed those contacts in this web story in the investigative section of KXAN.com. Mercedez Hernandez, State of Texas.
Thanks, Mercedes. After a property owner rejects an entity's offer, the matter goes to a judge and a special commission to decide if things can move forward. The commission is made of others that live in the county, but who are they? We take a closer look at that aspect in this story online now. Just look for our website on the link in this week's State of Texas story.
I rise in the memory of my mother.
The legacy of a late Houston representative carried on through her daughter. She's ready to serve on Capitol Hill, but find out why she won't be staying long. Texas has a new member of Congress. She's only serving for a few weeks, but she's honoring a legacy decades in the making. On Tuesday, Erica Lee Carter took the oath of office to finish her late mother's term in Congress. Houston Representative Sheila Jackson Lee died in July after a battle with cancer. She served nearly 30 years in Congress. Her death prompted a special election to fill the seat until January, when the new Congress is sworn in. Jackson Lee's daughter ran and won.
I'm grateful for this moment in time to do this work and be a small part of my mother's tremendous legacy in this body.
Carter was elected on November 5th, the same day voters chose former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner to represent the district for the next 2 years. Jackson Lee had won the Democratic primary prior to her death, and local precinct chairs chose Turner to run for a full term. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.